آمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. So usually for the last few Tuesdays I've been competing with the presidential primaries. We don't have to do that today. And there's beautiful news from the primaries today that Senator Ted Cruz is coming home, alhamdulillah, back to Texas. And that's really why we're happy, right? Because we want him back. So anyway, you guys don't have to check any NBA scores. You don't have to check any presidential primaries. I have your full attention this week, inshallah ta'ala. So tonight's going to be a different halaqa. We finished Kitab al-Iman. We finished the book of faith from Sahih al-Bukhari, alhamdulillah. And so today I wanted it to be sort of a wild card because I didn't feel like I wanted to start a heavy chapter before Ramadan actually comes in, inshallah ta'ala. So we'll make use of these Tuesday nights, inshallah, for some of the ahadith studies that would be related to Ramadan. And it occurred to me that, obviously one of the things that many of us do is that we automatically skip Shaaban. We skip the month of Shaaban in looking towards Ramadan. And there are many things that are to be said about this time period that we're about to enter into. There's a lot of fabrication, there's a lot of innovation, and there's a lot of sunnah. So trying to actually find out what we're supposed to be doing, how we're supposed to approach this month, inshallah ta'ala, as a means of preparing ourselves for Ramadan is very special. So we're going to talk about the month of Shaaban. Everything about the month of Shaaban, the hadiths about it, the fiqh of it, how the Prophet ﷺ used to deal with this month, and what we should be really doing in preparation for Ramadan. First of all, why is it named Shaaban? Now, when it comes to the Islamic calendar, the Hijri calendar, there's something you need to keep in mind. Every month is named either after the weather or after war. Alright, it has something to do with the weather or it has something to do with war. So in many situations, many of the months, when the Hijri calendar was instituted or when those months were made, it came within that particular season. So Rabi' obviously meaning spring, Jumada being winter, even though it's a lunar calendar and obviously it's going to come out of place at times, but when these months were named, they were named within those particular seasons. Ramadan was called Na'iq before Ramadan, but Ramadan refers to the ashes, to the heat, the extreme heat, right, in Ramadan, because the first time they fasted Ramadan, it was under intense heat. So sometimes it's about weather, many times it's about war. You have Al-Ashhur al-Haram, you have the 4 sacred months, which are, we're in one right now, Rajab. Sha'ban is not a sacred month. Rajab, before Dhul Hijjah comes, Dhul Qa'dah, Rajab, Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, Muharram. Okay? Rajab, Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, Muharram. Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, Muharram are all together. Meaning Dhul Qa'dah and Dhul Hijjah are the last 2 months of the year. Muharram is the first month of the year. Rajab is all alone. And actually the meaning of the word Rajab is a tawaqquf, which means to stop. Because the Arabs were used to going to war for a long period of time, and then suddenly Rajab came out of nowhere and it stopped them. It made fighting forbidden. Okay? So it has a lot to do with war. And obviously within Al-Ashhur al-Haram, the connotations of the sacred months to the pre-Islamic Arabs was that these were months, they honored these months, these were months that they could not fight, that they could not go to war with one another, so they put their tribal warfare on hold. And that was something that was, becoming accepted to all of the Arab tribes. However, what they would do is they would play around with the months. So sometimes they delay a month because they wanted to finish up a battle, or they bring the month a little bit earlier, or they join a few, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited them mixing up months because they did that to their advantage at times, just like they manipulated everything else. They managed to even manipulate the calendar to get themselves out of that. Right? Now obviously the Islamic connotation of a sacred month, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions it in the Quran, that not just to fight, not just to avoid al-qital, fighting with one another and so on and so forth, but la tadlimu anfusakum, don't abuse yourselves fihin, within them, meaning sins within these sacred months is far greater, or are far greater than they are outside. Good deeds generally are more appreciated, are multiplied, and sins are worse in these months than they are outside of these months because they're sacred months. So that's the connotations of the sacred months. Now Sha'ban is not a sacred month in that sense. It's not one of al-Ashhur al-Haram. And neither is Ramadan. See, the word sacred is deceiving because you automatically think, what are the best months of the Islamic year? Right? But again, it has its connotation to say that they are muharram, that they are forbidden months. They're months in which sin is even more strictly forbidden and fighting is even more strictly forbidden. So what about Sha'ban? What does Sha'ban have to do? Now again, you can either view it within the connotation of weather or war. And Imam ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala, he documents both of these possibilities. He says that one of the reasons why it could have been named Sha'ban, he says لِتَشَاعُبِهِمْ فِي طَلَبِ الْمَاءِ لِتَشَاعُبِهِمْ فِي طَلَبِ الْمَاءِ, which means that in this heat and things that they're going to go forth with Na'iq or Ramadan coming around the corner, what they would do in this season was they start to search for water. So they start to carve out their wells and get their water ready for the season that they were about to embark upon. That's if you see it within weather. In my opinion, Allah knows best. The second option that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentioned seems to be the more correct one historically, which is أَوْفِ الْغَارَاتِ. What that means is they would wait for Sha'ban to descend upon their enemy tribes. Right? Because they kind of held off in Rajab out of nowhere, and as soon as Sha'ban came, تَشَاعُبِهِمْ, they would jump upon, they literally descend upon the tribes they were at war with. So they were waiting for the month to come in so that they could attack those tribes that they'd held back from during the month of Rajab. So again, it's usually referred to as weather or war. Now this month, from a historical perspective as well, this is the month in which Ramadan was legislated. The fasting of Ramadan was legislated the second year after Hijrah. So in Sha'ban, the second year after Hijrah, the fasting of Ramadan, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن, the entire mandate to fast Ramadan was legislated in that month. Okay, it's also most likely the month in which the Qibla was changed from Jerusalem to Mecca. Because Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu said that the change of Qibla came 16 or 17 months after they made Hijrah to Medina. So that would mean either Rajab or Sha'ban of the second year. Most likely it's Sha'ban as well. Though there's no evidence to say it's the 15th of Sha'ban. You know, obviously when people are trying to gather everything about the 15th of Sha'ban, they just start throwing everything in there. So there's nothing at all to suggest that it would be the 15th of Sha'ban. However, most likely, you can imagine it was quite momentous. The second year after Hijrah, a change in Qibla. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ. So Allah honors the ummah in Surah Al-Baqarah with many praises, and then they get the greatest gift of all, which is the fasting of Ramadan. Right? The news that they will be fasting Ramadan. This all happens within this month, the second year after Hijrah. Now, what are some things about Sha'ban that we hear from the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? First of all, Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha. She says about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Sahih al-Bukhari, فَمَا رَأَيْتُ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ اسْتَكْمَلَ صِيَامَ شَهْرٍ إِلَّا رَمَضَانَ. I have never seen the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam fast an entire month without stopping except for the month of Ramadan. وَمَا رَأَيْتُهُ أَكْثَرَ صِيَامًا مِنْهُ فِي شَعْبَانَ. And I did not see him fast any month after Ramadan as much as he fasted the month of Sha'ban. Meaning he only fasted sallallahu alaihi wasallam the entire month of Ramadan. In every other month there were some exceptions to his fasting. But in Sha'ban, she said, I'd never seen him fast any month outside of Ramadan the way that he did in Sha'ban. And she says that this was a preference of the Prophet ﷺ. It was not merely by coincidence. And this is important to point out. An authentic hadith in Sunan al-Nasa'i, Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha says, كان أحب الشهور إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أن يصومه شعبان بل كان يصله برمضان. She said radiyallahu ta'ala anha that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or the month in which the Prophet ﷺ loved to fast more than any other month. Realize in Arabic there is mahabba. She's saying he loved it. He loved to fast this month more than any other month. It was indeed Sha'ban. And she says, بَلْ كَانَ يَصِلُهُ بِرَمَضَانِ. She says that he used to join it with Ramadan. What that means is, what Salama radiallahu anha says, that the Prophet ﷺ fasted the entire month of Sha'ban. There were times that he fasted the entire month of Sha'ban, And literally, it was like the 2 months coming together. Okay? So that's the extent to which the Messenger ﷺ used to fast this month of Sha'ban, that it was as if it was connected or joined with Ramadan, to where it was 2 months that were fasted together. Now the question becomes, why? Why do we fast, or why did the Prophet ﷺ fast so much in Sha'ban? And this becomes a source of great debate amongst the scholars and amongst the awam, the masses. They shouldn't be debating about anything, but they start to debate about this as well, right? Why did the Prophet ﷺ fast Sha'ban? Is it because of the virtue of the month itself? Or is it because of the virtue of the month of Ramadan, which comes after and in preparation of Ramadan? Or is it because of something before Sha'ban, meaning something the Prophet ﷺ wanted to get out of the way before Ramadan came? He was making up something, alayhi salatu wasalam. So there are a lot of possibilities within this realm. I'm going to put this out there that most of what I will say to you is from my favorite author, which is Imam Ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala. Imam Ibn Rajab rahimahullah, Abu al-Faraj, who wrote many books. In fact, I taught Al-Mahajjatu fi Sayyid al-Dulja in this masjid, The Journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by Al-Hafidh ibn Rajab. Great scholar, Abu al-Faraj ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, who wrote one of the most famous commentaries on the 40 hadith of An-Nawawi, which is called Lata'if al-Ma'arif. And Ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala is one of the few scholars that, or not few, I would say, actually there were a lot, but one of the more famous scholars that was really able to offer an authentic methodology of spirituality in this religion. An authentic methodology of spirituality in this religion. One that was true to the text, but at the same time very much so rooted in good akhlaq, in ihsan, in trying to pursue more and more of Allah's pleasure. So this is I'm going to use a lot of what he says in this debate, inshaAllah ta'ala, and we're going to go through it. The first hadith, which gives us an idea of why the Prophet ﷺ fasted so much of this month in Sha'ban, is actually an authentic hadith in Sunan al-Nasa'i, where Usama ibn Zayd radiyallahu anhu asked the Prophet ﷺ why he fasts so much in Sha'ban. So it doesn't get clearer than that, right? Someone asking the Prophet ﷺ why he fasts so much of the month of Sha'ban. Usama ibn Zayd is of course the son of Zayd ibn al-Haritha, who was at one point the adopted son of the Prophet ﷺ, and Usama was like a grandson to the Prophet ﷺ. He used to combine him with Al-Hasan and Hussein all the time. May Allah be pleased with them all. So Usama radiallahu ta'ala anhu says that I asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasulullah, I do not see you fasting any month the way I see you fasting in Sha'ban. Meaning Usama is expressing a form of ta'ajjub, a form of amazement. Like, how come you fast so much in Sha'ban? It's amazing why you give this month so much importance. And what's indicated in it, what's implied in it, as the scholars say, is that you don't find a single hadith of the Prophet ﷺ telling the Sahaba to go fast Sha'ban. So it's strange, because you're giving it so much importance in your practice, but you don't talk about it, right? So, Ya Rasulullah, why is it that you give Sha'ban such importance with your fasting? And the Prophet ﷺ said, and this is so beautiful, I'm going to read it very slowly for those that want to get it, inshallah. He says, ذَلِكَ شَهْرٌ يَغْفُلُ النَّاسُ عَنْهُ بَيْنَ رَجَبٍ وَرَمَضَانٍ. He said, this is the month that most people are heedless about. It's neglected. This is the neglected month between Rajab and Ramadan. This is the month يَغْفُلُ النَّاسُ عَنْهُ. So he's giving the reason, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. People don't think about Sha'ban. And really think about it. What's going on in Sha'ban? Everything is about Ramadan. Everything's talking about Ramadan. We have a Ramadan conference Sunday, right? Everyone is programmed. Rightfully so. I mean, the Sahaba had it 6 months in advance. But the Prophet ﷺ said, Sha'ban is completely lost between Rajab and Ramadan. Now, if you lived in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, you would see the effects of Rajab around you, because again, there is no fighting. Everything was treated with great sanctity by the Muslims and by the non-Muslims, right? So it's not like today where you have to think twice about what month you're actually in, unless it's Ramadan, right? Most Muslims, you say, what month are you in? You got to think twice about it, right? Now, if you say you're in Ramadan outside of Ramadan, then you're weird. But other than that, right, most people don't know what month they're in most of the time. So the Prophet ﷺ says, this is the month. يَغْفِلُ النَّاسُ عَنْهُ بَيْنَ رَجَبٍ وَرَمَضَانٍ So that's the first reason the Prophet ﷺ gave. Then he said the second one, وَهُوَ شَهْرٌ تُرْفَعُ فِيهِ الْأَعْمَالُ إِلَىٰ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. And it is the month in which the actions, the deeds of the son of Adam are raised to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be presented. So two reasons. Number one, people usually forget about Shaaban. It's a neglected month. Number two, the Prophet ﷺ says, وَهُوَ شَهْرٌ تُرْفَعُ فِيهِ الْأَعْمَالُ إِلَىٰ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. It is a month in which the deeds are presented to the Lord of the worlds. He says, فَأُحِبُّ أَنْ يُرْفَعَ عَمَلِي وَأَنَا صَائِمٌ. فَأُحِبُّ أَنْ يُرْفَعَ عَمَلِي وَأَنَا صَائِمٌ. So he said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, I love that my deeds are presented to Allah while I am in a state of fasting. So that's a third reason. Three reasons have been given in this hadith. What's the first reason? I'm going to go through them in detail now. What's the first one? It's a neglected month. People forget about it. The second reason? The deeds are presented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third reason, which is sort of a sub to the second one, the Prophet ﷺ likes to fast when deeds are presented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let's go through the implications of this inshaAllah ta'ala. The first one, the first reason was what? Most people don't think about Sha'ban. It's a neglected month between a sacred month in Rajab and the best month of the year in Ramadan. So it's between a shahr, that is a sacred month, and it's between the month of fasting. So it's naturally going to get lost in between the two. Right? People will naturally look over it. So let's talk about this inshaAllah ta'ala and what that means. Al-Hafidh ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala, Imam ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala says that what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling us is that the best time to show yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he literally says to show yourself to Allah is when other people are not doing it. Meaning that's how you actually stand out. When everyone is performing, then you don't really stand out. But the way that you make yourself really known as a muhsin, as a person of ihsan, a person who's striving for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that when no one else is looking for it, you're still looking for His rida, you're still looking for His pleasure. And this is a consistent theme that we find within the various texts, whether we're talking about the months, or we're talking about the weeks, or we're talking about the days. So Imam al-Jawzi rahimahullah ta'ala says that ghafla, the word heedlessness in the Quran and the Sunnah, when it's ascribed to a time of heedlessness, what it means is a time where most people do everything but worship. Most people do everything but ibadah. So when you do ibadah in these times, دَلَّ عَلَى حِرْصِهِ عَلَى الْخَيْرِ. It shows that you really want the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you still distinguish yourself in these times with ibadah, you're showing that you are really trying to gain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are many different examples that are given. So for example, within the day, one of the narrations in Muslim Imam Ahmad about the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, كانوا يستحبون إحياء ما بين العشاءين بين الصلاة وَيَقُولُونَ هِيَ سَاعَةٌ يُغْفَلُ النَّاسُ عَنْ طَاعَةِ اللَّهِ. That the companions used to love to distinguish themselves in worship between the two ishas. And the Prophet ﷺ used to say, make use of the time between the two ishas. What are the two ishas? Maghrib and Isha. So Maghrib is the minor Isha. It's the minor evening prayer. Isha, as we know it, is the later Isha prayer. So basically what we find is that these are times that the Prophet ﷺ said a person should make use of. Meaning what? Either in ibadah or in ilm. It's either to be made use of in knowledge or in worship. Why? Because it's usually the time people eat their dinner. That's usually the time people are sort of relaxing and unwinding for the rest of the day. So there are numerous narrations of the Prophet ﷺ praying multiple rak'ahs between Maghrib and Isha, where he would ﷺ go home, and Aisha radiallahu anha narrates he would be in his salah until the adhan of Isha was made. He'd keep on praying nawafil. Imam Hassan al-Basri rahimahullah said Qiyamul Layl includes the secret time. And they said, what is the secret time? He said, what's between the two Ishas, Maghrib and Isha. So he said if a person actually engages in nawafil, between involuntary prayers between Maghrib and Isha, they are actually praying tahajjud, they're actually praying Qiyamul Layl. Because the night in Islam is what's between Maghrib and Fajr. And he said most people, يُغْفَلُ عَنْهُ. People have ghafla with it. They're heedless about it. No one even thinks to do ibadah between Maghrib and Isha. It's actually a beautiful time because the Prophet ﷺ used to mention this concept of staying in the masjid between two salahs. You're forced to do so with the halaqa. It's actually a beautiful opportunity to gain that reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? To stay in a masjid between two salahs. Either busying yourself in knowledge or worship, nothing necessarily specific, but the idea is that you're busying yourself with something good. Qiyamul Layl. What's the best time to pray Qiyamul Layl? The best time to pray the night prayer. The last third of the night. Why? Because most people are sleeping. Right? You're distinguishing yourself between amongst this entire creation and saying, Ya Allah, here I am. Everybody else is asleep. Except for your few lovers, except for the few ibads that force themselves. تَتَجَافَى جُنُوبُهُمْ عَنِ الْمَضَاجِعِ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ خَوْفًا وَطَمَعًا وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. People literally fight with their sides. They get up and they stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they say, Ya Allah, here we are. Right? وَالنَّاسُ نِيَامٌ. Everyone else is asleep and I'm calling upon you, Ya Allah, distinguishing myself by Qiyamul Layl. The hardest time to stand up and pray at night is the most beloved time because it's the time that most people are likely going to be sleeping. We also find obviously that when the Prophet ﷺ mentions that the best times to do dhikr, the best times to do remembrance are al-ghadwa wal-rawha, which al-ghadwa is the time between fajr and duha prayer, so between the fajr and the sunrise, because people, again, are getting their day started with breakfast, whatever it may be. So if you manage to remember Allah in those times, it's wonderful. And al-rawha, which is the time between Asr and Maghrib. Very few people can find time to do dhikr between Asr and Maghrib. And you know what? If you try to start implementing dhikr in your day, remembrance in your day, you'll find it much easier to remember Allah after Fajr than you will between Asr and Maghrib, because Asr and Maghrib is just too hectic. There's too much going on between the two. So it's even more beloved at that time. So basically, the harder it is to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the more likely it is that people are not engaged in ibadah, is the time that you distinguish yourself in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Which is why, of the most rewarding du'as, so this is in regards to time and place, of the most rewarding du'as to make is du'a as-suq, the du'a in the marketplace. La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, lahul mulk wa lahul hamd, yuhyi wa yumit, wa huwa hayyun la yamut, biyadihi al-khayr, wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever says this du'a upon entering the marketplace, Allah writes down for him 1,000,000 hasanat, and erases 1,000,000 sayyi'at, and raises him by 1,000,000 darajat. وَبَنَى لَهُ بَيْتًا فِي الْجَنَّةِ, and Allah builds him a house in paradise. Why? Because people enter the marketplace, they're not thinking about Allah. You distinguish yourself in that place by dhikr. That even as you enter into the marketplace, you're still engaged in dhikr. So it's a time of ghafla. And Ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala, he continues in this regard, and he says that when a person does ibadah in a time where others are in ghafla, when others are in heedlessness, and they're trying to distinguish themselves in the sight of who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says one of the consistent things we see from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the idea of hiding those particular deeds. Meaning, hiding Qiyamul Layl is highly emphasized. You're not supposed to tell anyone about your Qiyamul Layl. It completely defeats the purpose. Right? You don't tell anybody about your Qiyam and Tahajjud. In fact, sometimes if you can even hide it from your family members, then do so. Okay? That's the idea here, because it's a time when most people are sleeping, and so you don't want to attract the attention of people, you want to attract the attention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise, a secret fast, nawafil fasts, a person should try to hide that they're fasting. You know, just say you're not hungry when someone offers you food. Unless, of course, there are times where you're trying to encourage people to fast as well, as do it as a group, whatever it may be. But just generally speaking, hide your fasting. Just say, oh no, I'm not hungry right now. Right? A person would, of course, we see from the Salaf, we see from the pious predecessors, would hide their fasting for 40 years without anyone finding out about it. Right? They would fast daily for 40 years. But no one would know about it. So this is the idea here. Don't make it known to others as well. So just generally speaking, when it comes to worship that's done within this category of worship when other people are not worshiping, keep it secret. And there's a gem that I noticed here, and Allah knows best. I could be completely wrong here, but every single narration about the Prophet ﷺ fasting Sha'ban is narrated either by Aisha or Salama or Usama bin Zayd, which means they're all the people in his household. No one's narrating this outside of his house. It's his wives and his grandson, basically, right? The son of his once adopted son, who continued to be included amongst the grandchildren of the Prophet ﷺ, which means the Prophet ﷺ did this as a form of tatawwu', as a form of voluntarily seeking that pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that actually gives us a message, that gives us a way that we should carry ourselves. That if you're going to fast Sha'ban, try to have some secret days of fasting in Sha'ban as well, because these are days where most people are not going to be fasting. And Ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala, he continues, he says that, and in that situation, he says, Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala anhu says, إِذَا أَصْبَحْتُمْ صِيَامًا فَأَصْبِحُوا مُدْهَنِينَ, which means that if you're going to wake up fasting on a voluntary day, he said, wear perfume. How does that even make sense? Mudhaneen here, what he means by duhan, what he means by perfume here, he means look fresh, smell fresh, don't look like someone who's tired, don't look like someone who's struggling. And that's why the Sahaba, if they prayed Qiyam al-Layl, they would try to walk faster the next day, because if they walked really slow, then people would know that they were standing up all night and praying. So they try to walk faster, they try to look fresher. So Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu said, if you're fasting that day and you don't want people to know, then try to keep yourself looking very fresh. Try to keep yourself avoiding any type of connotation of zuhud or asceticism, or this is a person engaged in ibadah. Because you want to attract the attention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's the point of this. We also see that within Sha'ban, because it's a month of ghafla, a month of general heedlessness, right? A lot of people want to get their last deeds in with shayateen before they're out. And obviously the shayateen are going to get really active. They're going to try to make you mess up really bad before they get locked away, right? So a lot of people will increase some things because you have in your mind that, well, Ramadan's coming around, I'm planning to quit this habit. So let me kick back and enjoy this last day, right? Let me go, let me listen to the CD one more time and, pop out my cigar or whatever it is. Hopefully nothing worse than that, right? And let me just enjoy it for the last day, the last few days, right? Ramadan's coming around, inshallah, I'm going to quit this all. Yeah, right. So last 3-4 days, you actually convince yourself, well, let me go spend some time doing some of those sins that I plan to quit in Ramadan. So that's a backwards mentality. It's actually a backwards mentality. Obviously, you might not live to see Ramadan for one, but again, you're failing to prepare yourself for Ramadan. And so he quotes, subhanAllah, this is beautiful. He says that the Sahaba were opposite of this. He says that Kana Ammar radiyallahu anhu, this is actually a narration about Ammar ibn Yasir radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, it's an authentic narration. Kana Ammar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu يتهيأ لصوم شعبان كما يتهيأ لصوم رمضان. It's beautiful. It says that Ammar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu used to basically treat his fasting in Sha'ban the way that he would treat his fasting in Ramadan. Like it was that serious to him. It was that serious to them. Like we're preparing ourselves, we're getting ready, we're in training camp now, so we're going to play like this is the real game. We're going to fast like this is the real month, basically. He also says that Sha'ban is the preparation of the month of Qur'an. Right? It's not meant to be ignore the Qur'an. And how many people that don't read any Qur'an throughout Sha'ban have this goal to finish the Qur'an in Ramadan and they don't do it? Sha'ban is the month to prepare yourself for Qur'an. And so there are various narrations that we see in this regard. We see from Salama ibn Kuhayd al-Hadrami, who is one of the tabi'een, rahimahullah ta'ala, that when people would see him, what he would say to them, عندما رأى قومه, when he saw his people, he says إذا أقبل عليهم he says that إذا أقبل عليكم شهر شعبان, if Sha'ban comes upon you, تفرغوا لقراءة القرآن الكريم شهر شعبان شهر القراءة. He said that when Sha'ban comes upon you, focus now on reciting the Qur'an, because the month of Sha'ban is the month of recitation. Another narration, which is from Amr ibn Qais radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, Amr ibn Qais كان إذا دخل شهر شعبان أغلق حانوته وتفرغ لقراءة القرآن, that when Sha'ban would come around, he would already start closing his shop early and spending and dedicating a time of his day to the recitation of the Qur'an. This is in Sha'ban, okay? And so Ibn Rajab rahimahullah says, and they used to call Sha'ban Shahrul Qurra or Shahrul Qira'ah. Shahrul Qurra or Shahrul Qira'ah, which means the month of the reciters or the month of recitation. What does that mean, Shahrul Qurra? The month of reciters. You know, if you're someone, just imagine if you're someone that's going to lead Taraweeh. And it is incredibly stressful, by the way. Like, you have no idea. And every time the imam makes a mistake and you jump on him before he can even think about it twice, you're literally knocking away at his confidence and stressing him out, like you're knocking his stress level up by 2,000. Everybody knows you know Surah Yasin, mashallah. Like whenever the imam starts reciting Surah Yasin, everybody jumps in. Juz' amma. Seriously, you don't have to yell from 20 rows back to correct him. And, you know, Qul Huwallahu Ahad. There are people behind him, inshallah, that can handle that. Right? But the idea is it's extremely stressful. You ask anyone that's led Taraweeh or that leads Taraweeh, like they're getting ready. It is seriously training camp, right? Because it's like, you've got to make sure that you've got it right. You've got the tilawah right. And subhanAllah, there are people, just think about this. This is probably an emotional rant right now, so I'm going to stop for, very soon. There are people that teach Quran for a living. Like they're hifadh and they teach hifd for a living, hours and hours a day, and they're still making mistakes in Taraweeh. You imagine a person who's got a full-time job, a person who does not do that, who doesn't get to teach it and that kind of stuff, and they try to get ready for it every year. It's extremely stressful, incredibly stressful. So they called it Shahrul Qurra, the month of the reciters, because those who wanted to prepare themselves for recitation, not necessarily in Taraweeh, but in their qiyam and for the lofty goals. So let's say, I already have in my mind, I'm going to do a khitmah 4 or 5 times in Ramadan, not once in Ramadan, 4 or 5 times in Ramadan, inshallah. Right? Or 2 times. You're going to bump it up a notch. Then you want to step it up in Sha'ban. So they actually called it the month of recitation. There is no way you can completely neglect the Quran in Sha'ban and get anything done in Ramadan that's meaningful. Seriously. There is no way for you to completely neglect the Quran and then immediately have a relationship with it in Ramadan. So if you've been struggling with your relationship with the Quran throughout the year, now's the time to reestablish it, not Ramadan. And if you're someone that already has a relationship with the Quran, but it's a routine relationship throughout the year, now's the time to make it extra special in light of Ramadan coming upon you, so that you can knock it into that next gear, inshaAllah ta'ala. So it was actually called the month of Qira'ah, the month of recitation, and the month of the reciters. And كانوا يقولون شهر رجب وشهر الزرع. They used to say that the month of Rajab is the month of planting the seeds. وشهر شعبان هو شهر سقي الزرع. And the month of Sha'ban is when you water those crops. And they used to say وشهر رمضان هو شهر حصاد الزرع. And the month of Ramadan is the month in which you reap those crops. This is not a hadith. A lot of people say it as a hadith. There are a lot of beautiful things about Rajab, Sha'ban, and Ramadan, like in one sentence. None of them are hadiths. Okay? So the dua, for example, about making dua for barakah and Rajab and Sha'ban and then Ramadan, it's not an authentic hadith, at least. Okay? Likewise, there's a bizarre narration, but it does get passed around. I think it's that Rajab is the month of Allah, Sha'ban is the month of the Prophet ﷺ, and Ramadan is, I know too many fabricated narrations, I'm sorry. Some of you are like, I never heard that one before. Well, if you get it on Facebook, then you can go, aha, I heard it, right? And they say Ramadan is the month for my ummah. It's a fabricated narration that actually did get passed around. But the Salaf, the predecessors, indeed, they used to say that Rajab is the month in which you plant the seeds. So you're actually preparing yourself from Rajab. And that's the wisdom of a sacred month coming 2 months before Ramadan as opposed to the month before. Sha'ban is where you really start to water those seeds. You water those crops, and then Ramadan is where you're actually going to be able to reap what you have sowed, and hopefully it's good that you reap in that situation. We then go on to what Ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala mentions on the wisdom of fasting Sha'ban. What's the wisdom of the Prophet ﷺ? Another wisdom in regards to taking advantage of this month where most people forget and most people don't do any ibadah because they're just kind of taking a break before their ibadah comes in. He says that what it does is, it takes away the hardship of fasting, only leaving the sweetness of it. So by the time Ramadan comes, you're only tasting the sweetness of fasting and not the hardship. Meaning what? He says Sha'ban, he literally calls it tamreen. He says it's practice. It's literally practice, so that by the time Ramadan comes around, you greet it biquwwatin wa nashat. with strength and with energy. You're not having to get over that slump over the first few days of trying to get used to fasting. A lot of people think there's good in that, and because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ saying not to fast a day or two before Ramadan. I'm going to talk about that hadith and how it doesn't actually apply here. You should actually prepare yourself for Ramadan by getting used to the habit of fasting. That's not why the Prophet ﷺ forbade fasting a day or two before Ramadan. That's a misplaced understanding of that hadith. Okay? You should, because you want to get into Ramadan already accustomed to it. You know how to fast already, so now, but everyone knows the fasting of Ramadan is not like the fasting around the year. You can tell the difference. Even when you fast Shaaban, it's not like fasting Ramadan. The fasting of Ramadan has its own sweetness to it. It's not like the fasting throughout the year. However, physically, you're accustomed to fasting by the time Ramadan comes in, if you fasted throughout Shaaban, so that you can just taste the sweetness of that fast. You're not trying to get over the long hardship and so on and so forth, because isn't it that the first 3-4 days of Ramadan are the most difficult, right? You're trying to get yourself used to that, especially in Texas, where Maghrib is going to be like 8:30 or something like that by the time Ramadan comes around. But don't complain, because mashallah, there are people that fast until 11 p.m. at night, and their fajr is like 2 a.m. So we've still got it good over here in that regard. But this is something that we're supposed to take into consideration. Shaaban is a month yughfalu nasu an, that people are heedless in regards to. So it's a time to distinguish yourself with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and kick it into that pre-Ramadan gear so that you can get yourself ready for it. The second reason given in the hadith by the Prophet ﷺ is what? You guys already forgot? Very good. The deeds are presented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on or in that month of Shaaban. Raf'ul a'mali ila Allah. The deeds are presented to Allah during that time. Now what does that even mean? Because doesn't Allah see your deeds all the time? And doesn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, isn't Allah always aware of what you're doing? Of course. However, these are the times of hisab. These are the times of accountability. These are the times that your presentation for the day, your presentation for the night, your presentation for the week, it's like annual reporting or monthly reporting or weekly reporting or daily reporting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always watching you, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always aware. But these are the times in which your reporting is taken into consideration in a way that's befitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the scholars say that raf'ul a'mal, the presentation of deeds to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, happens in 3 different levels. Number 1, there is raf'u yawmi, which means your daily presentation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When are your deeds presented to Allah? Every single day. Does anyone know? During the day. Asr and Fajr. Fajr and Asr. The time of Fajr and Asr is when your deeds are presented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on a daily basis. How do we know? The authentic hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he says that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends the angels. It's a hadith from Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And they are constantly watching you through the day and the night. The Prophet ﷺ says, "Malaikatun bil-layl wa malaikatun bin-nahar." So a set of angels watch you during the day, a set of angels watch you during the night. You have shifts. Your angels have shifts. There are angels that watch you throughout the day, and there are angels that watch you throughout the night. And he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَيَجْتَمِعُونَ فِي صَلَاةِ الْفَجْرِ وَصَلَاةِ الْعَصْرِ. They meet all together at Fajr and Asr. This is where your angels, as they're exchanging shifts, they meet with one another. And he says, then they go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the angels, as there's a time where they're meeting each other, and there's a time where they're meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, فَيَسْأَلُهُمْ وَهُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِهِمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks them, even though He knows what His servants are doing. Allah knows what we're doing, but Allah asks the angels anyway. He says, كَيْفَ تَرَكْتُمْ عِبَادِي. How have you left my servants? فَيَقُولُونَ تَرَكْنَاهُمْ وَهُمْ يُصَلُّونَ وَآتَيْنَاهُمْ وَهُمْ يُصَلُّونَ. And they say, we left them while they were praying, and we came to them while they were praying. Meaning those shifts of angels, because they're switching out at Fajr and Asr, when they came to you, you were praying, and when they left you, you were praying. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala boasts about His servants that are always in prayer. So it's a beautiful thing that When your deeds are presented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when Allah asks about you every single day, that the angels left you in a time of salah, which is why the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, for a person to preserve al-bardain, the two cool prayers, not cool in like the slang sense, like cool in the sense like it's cold. Why? Because in the desert, obviously, Fajr is when the sun is about to rise. Asr is when the sun's about to set. So it's the cooler prayers in that regard. So the Prophet ﷺ said, if a person preserves those two prayers, then they will surely enter into Jannah, and they would be amongst those who see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala day and night. So that's a daily accounting that Allah takes of you. The second one is Raf'u Usbu'i, which is the weekly accounting that is taken of you. When is that? There's once a week and there's twice a week, but okay. The night of Friday, the Prophet ﷺ says, in this authentic hadith in Muslim Imam Ahmad, he says, "Inna a'mal bani Adam tu'radu kullu khamis laylat al-jum'ah." The Prophet ﷺ says that the actions of the son of Adam are presented every single Thursday, meaning the night of Friday. So Thursday evening. And he says, فَلَا يُقْبَلُ عَمَلُ قَاطِعْ رَحِمٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not look towards the deeds of one who is cutting off the ties of kinship. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, the deeds are presented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every Monday and Thursday. And the Prophet ﷺ says that Allah looks to the deeds of those that are in conflict with one another, those that are quarreling or holding grudges and not talking to one another. And he says, أَنظِرُوا هَذَيْنِ حَتَّى يَصْطَلِحَا. Leave these two until they fix that which is between themselves. So the Prophet ﷺ mentioned when he was asked why he fasts Mondays and Thursdays in particular, he said sallallahu alaihi wasallam that because the deeds are presented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I like to be in a state of fasting when the deeds are presented. Monday and Thursday throughout the week are basically Fajr and Asr throughout the day. If you guys understand the way that this is working, it's within the cycle, right? So Monday and Thursday, the Prophet ﷺ liked to be fasting when the deeds were presented to Allah. Which connects us to that first hadith, why the Prophet ﷺ mentioned fasting Shaaban is so blessed. Because the deeds are presented to Allah, and you want to be in a state of salah, Fajr and Asr. You want to be in a state of fasting, so that the angels go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala while you're in a state of fasting. So it's a beautiful thing. Then you have Raf'u Sanawi, which is the yearly accounting of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is in Sha'ban. The yearly accounting of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the yearly record is in Sha'ban. وَهُوَ شَهْرٌ تُرْفَعُ فِيهِ الْأَعْمَالُ إِلَىٰ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. As the Prophet ﷺ says, it is the month in which the deeds are ascend to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says, so I love that my deeds are presented to Him while I am fasting. So because Sha'ban remains that month, and if you guys think about what that means, your annual report is coming up in a few days. Your annual report with Allah is coming up in a few days. Sha'ban's right around the corner. You don't have time to be thinking about Ramadan or waiting for Ramadan to fix things. Your annual report is coming up in Sha'ban. وَإِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالْخَوَاتِيمِ. As the Prophet ﷺ says, that deeds are judged by the last of them. So if you made a sincere tawbah at the end of Rajab for that which you've done throughout the year, inshallah would wipe out all of that as presented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Sha'ban. And Imam Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he continues on a few other reasons why the Prophet ﷺ would fast Sha'ban. Alright, so he mentions three. The first reason Imam Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah mentions is that the Prophet ﷺ had the habit of fasting certain days voluntarily throughout the year. So for example, Monday and Thursday. Sometimes, or the Prophet ﷺ also had the habit of fasting the 3 middle days of the month, Ayyam al-Bid, which are the 13th, 14th, and 15th of every Islamic month. And the Prophet ﷺ had various other days in which he wanted to fast sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, due to travel or due to sickness or due to some other reason, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam missed those voluntary fasts. So he wanted to sallallahu alaihi wasallam make up those voluntary fasts before Ramadan came around. This is a level of ihsan. Remember, you have to make up a fard. You don't have to make up a voluntary deed. If you miss a voluntary deed, you don't have to make it up. But the Prophet ﷺ, if he did not pray at night, what did Salama say he did? He made up all his qiyam between Fajr and Dhuhr. That's how the Prophet ﷺ used to function. He made up even his voluntary deeds. it's not, it would be a burden on the ummah for us to have to do that. But the Prophet ﷺ, he had that standard for himself, alayhi salatu wasalam. So one of the things he used to do, ﷺ, so the first reason, he used to make up all the voluntary fasts that he missed throughout the year. The second one, he says, ta'zeeman li Ramadan, as a means of honoring Ramadan. He said, the same way that you would pray sunnah before fard, meaning there's a mandatory prayer coming up, so you would pray sunnah in attachment with that fard. The greater the fard, the greater the sunnah, and the more emphasized the sunnah becomes. So for example, the most emphasized sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is which one? The sunnah of Fajr. The sunnah of Fajr. The Prophet ﷺ says, rak'atayn qabl al-Fajr, 2 rak'ahs before Fajr, that are better than everything than the world and everything that is in it. More beloved than the world and everything that is in it. He would not miss those 2 rak'ahs even if he was traveling. That is the way that Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah is saying that Sha'ban should be viewed. If you want to think of a proper analogy of Sha'ban and Ramadan, think of the Sunnah of Fajr and Fajr. Okay, so he says the Prophet ﷺ used to give special reverence by fasting, ta'zeeman li Ramadan, in a way of looking towards Ramadan. So it wasn't about Sha'ban, it was really about Ramadan. Meaning what? Those 2 rak'ahs of the Sunnah Fajr, just to give you some perspective on this, because I mentioned this as an opinion of the scholars and it might not have been clear. Those 2 rak'ahs of the Sunnah of Fajr, if you prayed them any other time throughout the day, they don't have that significance at all. So it's not about the Sunnah of Fajr, it's about Fajr itself. And the fact that those 2 rak'ahs come before Fajr. So in this opinion, which is the opinion of many of the scholars, it's not, Sha'ban itself is not special. Ramadan is special. And because Ramadan is special, Sha'ban becomes special by extension. Make sense to you guys or not? Okay, good, alhamdulillah. So that's the second one. Number 3, he said because the deeds are shown to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this month, and he always liked to be fasting in those times. So he mentions what we already mentioned. There's another opinion which some of the scholars advance, like Imam al-San'ani rahimahullah ta'ala. It's very beautiful. Because it actually historically makes sense. He said the Prophet ﷺ wanted to join his wives who were making up missed Ramadan fasts in Sha'ban. Because we know that Aisha radiallahu anha says that the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, because of the exhaustion, I mean everything they had to go through, and obviously it's a pretty hectic lifestyle for them, they would still be making up the previous Ramadan's fasts in Sha'ban. Now it's prohibited or it's disliked, even prohibited according to the majority of the scholars, to delay one previous Ramadan to another Ramadan without an excuse. Right? If there's an excuse like pregnancy or breastfeeding or whatever it may be, that's fine. But a person just out of laziness, not making up their missed fast of Ramadan, and the next Ramadan comes in, it becomes very problematic. So what As-San'ani says is that the Prophet ﷺ wanted to join his wives as they were making up their fard fast. He would fast along with them, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's just a beautiful thing, right? A house of fasting is a good house. So Aisha radiallahu anha's fasting, the Prophet ﷺ will fast as well. Salama radiallahu anha's fasting, the Prophet ﷺ will fast as well. So those are some of the extra reasons. Now to go forth, inshallah ta'ala, because we said that, is Sha'ban, or this is a very important question, is Sha'ban special in and of itself, or is it special because of Ramadan? The Prophet ﷺ said, the best month to fast after Ramadan is what month? It's authentic hadith, Sahihain. Shahrullah Muharram. So the Prophet ﷺ said in authentic narration, there is no fasting which is more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala outside of Ramadan than fasting in Shahrullah Muharram, the month of Allah which is Muharram. A few notes on that hadith. The first 10 days of the Hijjah are obviously superior to the month of Muharram as a whole, right? But the Prophet ﷺ is saying that as a month, there is no month in which fasting, Jazakallah khair, in which fasting is more beloved than the month of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Muharram. So Ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala, he actually tackles this question. What's greater? Sha'ban, the fasting of Sha'ban, or the fasting of Muharram? Because there seems to be a contradiction here. Because the Prophet ﷺ fasted Sha'ban much more than he fasted Muharram. It's something that was clearly noted by his family members. So he says, and the way he divided this, on the same reasoning, the way that Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah reasoned about Sha'ban. He said that Shaaban to Ramadan is like a sunan al-ratiba or a sunan al-mu'akkada, meaning a confirmed sunnah, like the 2 rak'ahs before Fajr, whereas Muharram would fall in the category of the tatawwa'at, the voluntary fast, just the open fasts or the open prayers. So he said that Muharram, compared to the rest of the months, compared to the sacred months, the other sacred months like Rajab and Dhul Qa'dah and Dhul Hijjah, is a better month. But Sha'ban is assumed to still be the greatest sunnah because there's no way the words of the Prophet ﷺ can contradict his practice. So his practice here clearly indicates that he meant something else by saying the fasting in the month of Muharram is better. It also could mean, once again, that Muharram as a month, stand-alone month, is more virtuous than Sha'ban. But Sha'ban's fast, because of its connection to Ramadan, is more virtuous. So he says that's a way of reconciling between the two. Al-Hafidh ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala, he also commented on the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, where she said that I never saw the Prophet ﷺ fast a month like he fasted Sha'ban. He commented on that, and he says that shows that that's the best month of fasting after Ramadan. So Sha'ban is an exception to that hadith according to these scholars. We also find that Ibn Rajab rahimahullah says, and this is a very powerful statement to make, he said that if you took the days of the Prophet ﷺ throughout the year, this is a mind-blowing notion, by the way, but it makes sense. Who did the Prophet ﷺ say has the most beloved of fasting, or the best fasting? Like, what's the best siyam you could do throughout the year? The fasting of Dawood alayhi salam. So the Prophet ﷺ told Abdullah bin Amr al-As, first he told him fast Mondays and Thursdays. Or first he told him fast 3 days of the month and that's good enough. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I can do more. I have more strength and azima, I can do more. So he said, fine, fast Mondays and Thursdays. Then he said, fine, you know what? The best fasting is the siyam of Dawood alayhi salam, the fasting of the Prophet David, peace be upon him, Dawood alayhi salam. He used to fast one day and he used to break his fast the next. Now here's the thing. Did Dawood alayhi salam's fast surpass the fasting of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? No. How do we know? What's the proof of that? Aisha radiallahu anha says that the Prophet sallallahu at times would fast for so long, meaning so many consecutive days in the year, that you would think he was never going to break his fast. Meaning it's outside of Ramadan, outside of the sacred days, whatever it may be, the Prophet ﷺ is just fasting every single day to a point that you thought to yourself, he's never going to stop fasting. Then she said he would break his fast to a point that you thought that he was never going to start fasting again. Meaning half of his year sallallahu alaihi wasallam was fasting, half of it was not. This is outside of Ramadan and outside of his routine fasting. So Ibn Rajab rahimahullah says, if you combine the days of the Prophet ﷺ in a year of fasting, they're more than half the year. So his siyam is still superior to the siyam of Dawood alayhi salam. See how amazing that is? SubhanAllah. So he said, and there's much precedence for that. We find it even from Anas ibn Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu and Salama radiallahu anha, that there were times the Prophet ﷺ would go on fasting for so long, so many consecutive days, you thought it would never stop. Right? And there were times where the Prophet ﷺ took a break from fasting to where you thought, okay, he's done with that routine. He's done with fasting so much. Then he'll go into fasting a month or two consecutively, and you say, okay, maybe he's back on it. So the Prophet ﷺ used to fast for more than half the year if you take all of those things into consideration. Now, particularly what we get into, just lastly, the fiqh of it. Is it impermissible to fast after the 15th of Sha'ban or not? Why? Because there's, number one, a widely authentic hadith, meaning a hadith that is agreed upon by the hadith narrators, by consensus. The Prophet ﷺ said, do not, what's the right word? I'm trying to look for the right word. But anyway, he said, ﷺ, do not precede Ramadan by 1 or 2 days of fasting. Meaning what? Don't preemptively, basically, or preempt Ramadan. That's the word I'm looking for. Don't fast 1 or 2 days before Ramadan in any way. What is the Prophet ﷺ talking about here? He's talking about fasting a day or two before Ramadan, not to prepare yourself for fasting as many people mistake it, but in a way that you think that it's sunnah to do so. It's sunnah to always be cautious and fast a day or two before Ramadan starts. So the Prophet ﷺ said, do not fast 1 or 2 days before Ramadan, except that it's part of your habit anyway. So the Prophet ﷺ said, if it's part of your habit, it's fine. Meaning, if Ramadan's going to start on a Friday, and it's a Thursday, you don't, and you usually fast Mondays and Thursdays, go ahead and fast Thursday. Or if you're fasting the entire month of Shaaban anyway, go ahead and keep fasting, right? But don't, for the sake of Ramadan, precede Ramadan or preempt Ramadan with 1 or 2 days of fasting. So that's a hadith. Let's put it on the side. Completely agreed upon. The second hadith, which is one that is not as agreed upon. Some of the hadith scholars believe it to be authentic, some of them don't. So contemporary scholar Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala held it to be authentic. And that is the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, if nisf Sha'ban comes, if half of Sha'ban has passed, do not undertake fasting. Do not start to fast. Again, these two hadiths are clearly talking about a person starting the habit of fasting or starting to fast and it wasn't their habit. Now that hadith, to be honest with you, the majority of scholars still believe that it's okay to start to fast after half of Sha'ban has passed, but the Prophet ﷺ was really talking about it in spirit. He's talking about just like what he meant by don't precede it by 1 or 2 days, even if the hadith is authentic. But again, the point being here, you don't start to fast when Sha'ban is ending. It should be your habit before Sha'ban is ending or before half has passed, in the opinion of Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala and some of those scholars. Then you should not start to fast. So that's the second one. There's a third hadith, interesting hadith. Hadith is in Sahih Muslim. Imran ibn Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu said that the Prophet ﷺ was asking a person, هل سمت من سرر هذا الشهر شيئا? It's Sha'ban. And the Prophet ﷺ is saying in the month of Sha'ban, did you fast from surar? In Muslim it's surar, in Bukhari it's sirar. Okay, or sarar. Sorry, surar or sarar. Did you fast surar or the sarar of this month? And the man said, no. So the Prophet ﷺ says, then in that case, whenever you finish Ramadan, فَصُمْ يَوْمَيْنِ مَكَانًا, fast 2 days in its place. The hadith is in Sahih Muslim. It's in al-Bukhari as well. Now what are surar and what are sirar? Surar or sirar refer to the last days of the month, meaning the moon is disappearing. The moon is basically secretive. Okay, so the moon is disappearing now. So in this hadith, it appears the Prophet ﷺ is telling a person, why didn't you fast the end of Sha'ban? Right? Why didn't you fast the end of Sha'ban? And the way that the scholars reconcile these hadith is that this was a man who was already in the habit of fasting, and the Prophet ﷺ was asking him why he broke that habit, basically. So again, if you're in the habit of fasting, there's no problem, there's no prohibition on starting to fast or on fasting after the end of Sha'ban, the half point of Sha'ban, or towards the end of Sha'ban. Now why is there such a strong prohibition then? And that's what we get to. The Prophet ﷺ forbade Yawm al-Shak, the day of doubt. Fasting the day of doubt. I hear it in khutbahs and halaqas all the time that the Prophet ﷺ didn't want you to go and try to prepare yourself for fasting before Ramadan. Like, let me try to get in shape now. That's not what the hadith is talking about. Because the Prophet ﷺ prohibits fasting a day or two before Ramadan with such intensity that he says, whoever fasts Yawm al-Shak, فَقَدْ عَصَى أَبَا الْقَاسِمِ, he's disobeyed the Prophet ﷺ. That's a strong distancing of himself sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why is it that the Prophet ﷺ is so strict on this idea of, because you think it's a good thing. You know, I don't know what the moon sighting is going to be like, but I'm going to fast this day anyway. Right? So I'm not really sure how it's going to come out and how it's going to play out. But out of my religiosity, I'm going to go ahead and fast this day anyway. Why would the Prophet ﷺ hate that so much? It would cause disunity. But what else? Theologically, what does it do? Yeah. It's an innovation actually. It will make Ramadan effectively 31 days every single year. And the Prophet ﷺ doesn't want that, because you're going to corrupt the religion. So the Prophet ﷺ's strong prohibition of fasting the day of doubt, or a day or two at the end of Sha'ban, in anticipation of Ramadan, basically on the notion or on the basis that I want to be cautious and fast just in case Ramadan comes in, is a wrong way of thinking. And the scholars say that the Prophet ﷺ wanted to leave a distance, a break between Sha'ban and Ramadan, the same way he made a break between the Sunnah and the Fard. Right? Meaning, you can't say, okay, I'm going to just, instead of praying 2 rak'ahs sunnah for Fajr and 2 rak'ahs Fard, let me just go ahead and pray them 4 together. There should be a break. So the Prophet ﷺ wanted to have a clear break always between something that's sunnah and something that's fard. So we can say it's sunnah to fast Shaaban. It's sunnah to fast Shaaban. But at the same time, a person, and the Prophet ﷺ wanted to have a break between the two. At the same time, a person should not try to fast a day or two before Ramadan comes in on the basis that he's being more religious or it's a superior move, because if he does that, then he is adding something to the religion. He's literally adding days to Ramadan. And that would become the culture of the ummah, and the people would take that in as a result of that. Now lastly, the last discussion is there any superiority to the 15th night of Shaaban? Is there any superiority to Nisf Shaaban? This is where it gets heated, and this is where people start to argue and things of that sort. Now from a pure usuli perspective, from a pure scholarly perspective, a textual perspective, it really depends how you grade the hadith that have been narrated in that regard. Because the vast majority of the hadith are highly problematic. So if you consider some of those hadiths to be authentic about the superiority of the night, then obviously you'll assume that position. If you don't consider those hadith to be authentic, then as the scholars would not assume that position. So the vast majority of the hadiths we can say for sure are actually fabricated. They're not even somewhat weak, but they're actually fabricated altogether. However, there is one hadith which is authentic for sure. It's a beautiful hadith. The Prophet ﷺ says, يَطْلُعُ اللَّهُ فِي لَيْلَةِ النَّصْفِ مِنْ شَعْبَانَ فَيَغْفِرُ لِجَمِيعِ خَلْقِهِ إِلَّا لِمُشْرِكٍ أَوْ مُشَاحٍ. The Prophet ﷺ says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks to all of His creation on the 15th night of Sha'ban, which would mean the 14th day, 15th night. And فَيَغْفِرُ لِجَمِيعِ خَلْقِهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives all of His creation except for a disbeliever or a mushahin. A mushahin is in slang, right? It's a charger, right? in the Arabic language. But mushahin is someone that has in their heart shahna, which is a heart that's consumed with hatred. Like it's not just enmity, you don't just dislike somebody, but you have such spite in your heart towards a person that it's literally consumed your heart. So it's taken away your capacity to love Allah and to focus in ibadah. It's immersed in hatred. So the Prophet ﷺ said Allah looks to His creation on that night, and Allah forgives everybody except for someone that falls in one of those two categories. If you have kufr, if you're a disbeliever, or if a person has that hatred. Why? Because we already said that the Prophet ﷺ has established Allah rejects the deeds of a person who's at war with his brother or his sister. Allah does not even look at their deeds. So we can establish now, when you connect the hadiths, that the deeds are presented to Allah in Sha'ban, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala issues an amnesty across the ummah. This is to calm everyone down now, because I told you guys your annual reporting, your annual accounting, Allah will forgive all of the ummah, subhanallah. He puts it all to the side before Ramadan. So Allah gives you a clean record before Ramadan starts, except for a disbeliever or a mushahin. And the other authentic narration, so this hadith is authentic in two ways. The only difference is that the second word after mushrik in the other hadith is qatilu nafs, someone who murdered someone else. Now, so in the second narration, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned a disbeliever or someone who murdered someone else. So obviously, if shahna grows, if a person becomes mushahin to an extent, they would actually take the life of a person. So what that shows us is that the 15th night is generally a night which obviously has some virtue established in the hadith. There's a general virtue now that's established that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks to His creation, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives everyone in that regard. Is it Laylatul Qadr? That's a narration, a very weak narration that's attributed to Ikramah, rahimahullah ta'ala, that's rejected obviously by the vast majority of scholarship. Is it sunnah to fast that day then? Is it sunnah to fast the 15th of Sha'ban? Yes or no? I'm wrapping up in a couple of minutes, inshallah. Is it sunnah or not? It's sunnah to fast the 13th, 14th, and 15th of every Islamic month. So it's sunnah to fast anyway. So the debate is irrelevant. Is it sunnah to fast because it's the 15th of Shaaban? There's nothing to establish that. Is it sunnah to fast anyway on the 15th of Shaaban? Yes. Is it a time the Prophet ﷺ taught us that our deeds, when our deeds are being presented to Allah, it's sunnah to be fasting anyway? Yes. Is it sunnah to remove the hatred of our hearts and make sure the grudges are gone? Yes. All of that is a sunnah to be established. So how do we find a balance in approaching this night? Number one, we can derive from the text that it is generally a virtuous night. It is a virtuous night, clearly, right? So there's a basis. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, actually, it's traced to him that he called it Laylatul Bara, the day that the souls are freed. Why? Because again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks to the believers, He looks to the ummah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants amnesty across the board to all of them. However, all of the specific practices that have been narrated have no basis. So all the specific practices that have been narrated have no basis. So for example, the oldest innovation is called Salatul Alfiyah, which is to recite the Quls, recite Qul 1,000 times in Salah. That actually dates back to the 10th or 11th century, the 4th century Hijri. And you have Imam al-Suyuti wrote against it, Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah wrote against it, and so many scholars wrote against it. So the specific actions that you usually find in like a narration or whatever it is, none of those actually have any authenticity to them. However, what we find from Imam al-Shafi'i, from Imam bin Qudama, from even Shaykh al-Islam bin Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, he wrote about it in his Majmu' al-Hafidh ibn Rajab, and Imam al-Suyuti, is that this is a night that's to be observed with ibadah in the general sense, because it's a virtuous night. Every night is a good night of qiyam. Every middle of the month is a time of fasting. So yes, there is no harm, inshaAllah ta'ala, in a person in that sense, knowing the virtue of that night, doing the things that are legislated in the sunnah anyway. Right? Not attaching a particular practice to it, but instead just observing it because of its virtue. That's a legitimate opinion that has very strong evidence to it, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So inshallah we'll do the adhan, and then I'll take questions from you guys, and then we'll go ahead and we'll do the salah inshallah. We won't delay the salah too long. So let's go ahead and do the adhan, and then we'll take questions inshallah ta'ala, and then we'll move on to salah.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد. اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمد الوسيلة. Okay, we'll take a couple of questions inshallah, then we'll start. We'll go to salah. If no one has questions, mashallah. Yeah.
So one day, Shayateen last, is that the day before Ramadan?
One day what?
The Shayateen having last.
Oh, the shayateen being locked up. When are the shayateen locked up? The hadith about the shayateen being locked up is not all of the shayateen are locked up. What the hadith means is that either and actually the strongest opinion, their effect is reduced. So the big shayateen are locked up, their effect is reduced. But if there were no shayateen, then husband and wife wouldn't fight, I remember actually, a brother coming to me, first day, and he's like, I don't believe the hadith. I said, why? He said, because I'm still fighting with my wife. I'm like, okay, well, you've got issues. Number one, obviously within yourself you need to work out, right? But the idea here is that shayateen are not completely eliminated. But that takes place with the entrance of Ramadan, which is the night of Ramadan, the Maghrib, in which the moon is sighted, basically, the Hilal is sighted, and Ramadan enters. Yeah. How did the Prophet ﷺ celebrate Eid? That'll be another class, inshallah. That'll be another class. It's too long, inshallah. Any brothers? Alright, sister. Yeah, sorry.
If someone fasts with the intention only 15, with the intention to celebrate Shaaban, that means
Yeah, Laylatul Bara.
so, is it it's not he's not making 3 days, right? So is it acceptable?
So it's acceptable. Obviously, look, the idea here is that, again, this is a legitimate ikhtilaf amongst the scholars, as I said. What I would say is, just to be on the safe side, the intention is to observe what is unanimously a sunnah, which is to fast any of the middle days of the month. Okay, so you fast the 15th day, inshallah ta'ala, that's a sunnah regardless. It's a matter of the intention. So you make the intention to be in accordance with the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. We know that it's good, and hopefully, inshallah, you gain the reward as well, of when your deeds are presented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives the entire ummah on that night. Yes?
Is there a hadith that every month, middle of the month, the deeds are presented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
Is there a hadith that in the middle of the month the deeds are presented to Allah? Not that I know of. I personally don't know of any. I did not come across any of that. It might be, but I'll research it, inshallah. But I can't think of any hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ mentioned the 13th, 14th, and 15th as being months in which the deeds are presented to Allah. Yeah.
Allah is watching us, so why are we presented to Allah?
If Allah is watching us, why are the deeds presented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So, did you come late? I talked about it in the beginning of the class, inshallah. So just go back to the beginning of the recording. Yes?
Is there a directory of fake hadith?
Is there a directory of fake hadiths? Lots of them. But the problem, look, generally speaking, I get, people ask this question, how do I generally avoid fake hadiths or fabricated hadiths? You stick to the well-known collections. Like, there's plenty in Riyadh al-Salihin. There's, the first hadiths a person should know are the 40 hadiths of Imam an-Nawawi, and there's plenty in Riyadh al-Salihin, and the authentic collections, what are known in the authentic collections. But there are numerous false hadiths, and sometimes, again, the laymen in their overzealousness will also classify a hadith that is authentic as being fabricated because they think they heard on a website that hadiths are fabricated. So for example, I mentioned the authentic hadith of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgiving everyone on the night of the 15th of Shaaban. Many times people have attacked and said, that's a fake hadith, a fabricated hadith. Why? Because I read it on a website. Well, it's authentic hadith. So generally, and a lot of fake hadiths, honestly, a lot of fake hadiths are just so obviously fabricated. You kind of get a gauge for it once you start knowing. Once you immerse yourself in the study or listen to them commonly. If a hadith says that whoever goes to Mars on this day and on the 15th of Shaaban and prays 1,000 rak'ahs on Mars and then 50 on Jupiter and comes back, Allah will forgive them and 500 of their family members. Usually the hadiths with a lot of numbers are fabricated, but don't assume all of them are. All right, I'll take 2 more questions, inshallah. Yeah.
Fabricated hadith, is there a common rawi also? Like, do we know that?
There are many common rawis, but if I was to go through all the common narrators of fabricators, it would be a very long night. That's a study within hadith. So for example, most of the hadith about the virtues of particular surahs of Quran are from a particular fabricator. Like, you can identify him in the chain. And he said that he did that because he found people being too fascinated with Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. So he said, I saw people getting too attached to Imam Abu Hanifa and his fiqh, so I wanted to go and make up a bunch of hadiths about the Quran, so that people would love the Quran more than the fiqh of Abu Hanifa. So most of the hadiths that are known about the virtues of surahs are fabricated. Alright, last question. None? Okay, Jazakumullah khairan. Next week, I'll be in my second home of Malaysia, inshallah. We will not have class next week. We will start, inshallah ta'ala, the week after that. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless our Rajab, our Shaaban, and bless our Ramadan, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to prepare ourselves properly for it. Allahumma ameen. Jazakumullahu khairan. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا